positive online experiences for substitute teachers. In this first session, we will start to go over what online substitute teaching might look like and some tools that you can use in order to make your experience a more positive one and the students more engaged. My name is Kelly Daly, and I'm a curriculum specialist for the North Coast School of Education here at Sonoma County Office of Education. We all have those stories that you can see in this meme where we had a substitute teacher that particularly we related with. And that was certainly true for me. I was a substitute teacher. I had substitute teachers, and I was a substitute teacher in the early part of my career. So the purpose on why we're running this session is that, as we know it, education has been upended. The physical classroom used to come in with built-in structures that reinforced habit. Seating charts, the way that desks were placed in a classroom, the continuity of bells, when to go to lunch. And the online classroom can be a little disoriented, although we were teaching in the spring online, but we lose that framework. We lose the bell ringing to tell us to go to our next class or to go to recess. So the outcomes of this session would be for us to build our confidence in online teaching as a substitute teacher, remind ourselves that good teaching is universal, and we'll go over some tools for successful online instruction as a substitute teacher. What we'll be talking about today are our goals, and these are goals for actually online and blended substitute teaching. And in this first session, we will be specifically talking about online substitute teaching. In our next session, we will talk about hybrid or a blended model when a substitute teacher actually goes into the classroom. So the goals for today are to talk about cultivating relationships with students, building a community as a class, communicating effectively, engaging our students, and providing feedback. In terms of cultivating relationships, there are certain activities or things that you can do in order to cultivate relationships with students. And the first one is to find a way to share something personal. This gives students a view into your own life that allows you to be viewed as a person as well as their substitute teacher. It doesn't mean that you need to disclose something inappropriate or overshare, and one of the main ways that I cultivate relationships with my students is to storytell. As a substitute teacher in the 1990s, I often would share stories about my kayaking experiences. I was a big kayaker. And I tell a particular story about when I was kayaking in Tamales Bay and a shark came up beside my kayak and scared me like I have never been scared before. And that story that I tell about the shark oftentimes leads the students to ask questions like, how big was the shark? Was it the size of Jaws? Had I seen Jaws? And so that's just a personal way to start cultivating relationships with the students in an online platform. You'll want to use the student names, and I know that sounds simple or intuitive, but it's really a powerful way to let you know that the students are being seen and that they are important. You might want to keep a roster handy for with the students' names on them, and certainly if you are in a Zoom environment, you will want to have the students type their names in. The next area to cultivate relationships is compassion. And compassion lives in patience and connection. So demonstrating compassion for your students is not the same as wanting the students to like you. They're very different. And the simplest way to demonstrate to your students that you care and have compassion for them is to tell them often and in different ways. So genuine praise for tasks, asking questions about their day, again, sharing with them tidbits maybe from your life or your day. When a student acts out, it's often a reflection of problems in their lives outside of the classroom, and it's really important to be compassionate to these students as they face tumultuous issues in their everyday life, including having to learn in an online environment. Teachers can show compassion by avoiding classroom management techniques that humiliate students, calling them out publicly in front of their other classmates. And as a part of classroom management, even in an online environment, compassion can enhance the effectiveness of any strategies that you might be using. And the last area of cultivating relationships would be being flexible. And most importantly here, I think, is to be positive yourself. and to presume positive intent of the students that you're working with. We're all in a very new learning environment, and it can be isolating and challenging for both the teacher, substitute teacher, and students themselves. The next area I'd like to talk about is building community. So in terms of building community, you're going to want to connect with the staff for information that you might need. So you might need Google Classroom login information. You might need to find out where that teacher's assignments are, what the flow of the day is going to look like. Is it going to be on Zoom? So you'll need Zoom links and usernames. In addition, you might engage student introductions, have them introduce themselves in an interesting way. Maybe use a Bitmoji for them, maybe use a Bitmoji for yourself. Kind of lightens the tone of the class. And the most important one, I think, is to be explicit on what the students are to do. As a substitute teacher, you're not only navigating the lesson, but you're also navigating the social aspects of being online. And the more explicit you can be on what the students are to do in the lesson, and also what is due that day, will really help build community. And finally, to facilitate student collaboration. I feel is really important is putting students in breakout rooms, either in Zoom or in Google Hangout. And as a substitute teacher, one way to build community would be to enter into those Zoom breakout rooms or Google Meet, Google Hangout, and really listen to what the students are saying and connect with them on whatever assignment that you are asking them. Effective communication is also important. So with students, again, we talk about welcome messages. You might film yourself on, there's a platform called Flipgrid that's free and easy to use. You might have them, if that's available in the district that you're substituting, have them create a welcome message for you. It might even be good feedback for the teacher of record is to have the students film a welcome message that maybe you as a substitute teacher could watch beforehand. Also, fostering presence. When I talk about presence, I'm talking that teacher presence can foster student performance, especially in an online class. And there's 4 types of presence. There's cognitive presence, so knowing the content that you are going to be teaching the students or facilitating the students with, that can help your students. There's teaching presence. In teaching presence, we talk about encouraging students, creating a welcome environment, being organized, knowing questioning techniques, clarifying assignments when students need some clarification. There's also social presence, and with social presence, it's often nice to use some humor, again, sharing appropriate personal stories, addressing students by their name, and promoting collaboration. And finally, for feedback, I think it's important as a substitute teacher to leave feedback for the teacher of record. What worked, who was particularly helpful that day, where did the student seem most engaged in the lesson, and what might help for the next time the teacher needs a substitute teacher. What I have here is a to-do list link, and when you get this slide presentation, that's a live link, and it includes things to do before you arrive, when you arrive, if a clear lesson plan is provided, if you need to improvise, and at the end of each class. Also included in here, backup plans that are included, of any of which you can use, and it's from Swing Education. They're just ideas of what you might use in order to facilitate a class if there's no clear lesson plans. Finally, I want to thank you very much for listening to this session. When you get the slide link, you will see that these are live links to the specific resources for substitute teachers. Steady.org and swingeducation.com are specific websites that have lots of information for substitute teachers. And finally, there is a link to tips and tricks for teachers educating on Zoom. If you teach at a high school, it will more than likely you'll be teaching over the Zoom platform. And there's some tips like presetting your meeting to mute the participants' microphones upon entry, looking at the camera to create eye contact, taking a second to check the chat box to see if there's any questions that need to be clarified for the students, and knowing how to share images, files, videos, and even your screen. If you are working in a Google Classroom, you will also want to be able to familiarize yourself with that platform. And finally, if you have any questions, Julie Hunter is the credential clerk at the Sonoma County Office of Education, and her email is jhunter@scoe.org, and she can help you with any questions. Again, thanks very much.